All right. Hello, just for the recording's sake. Hello again, and welcome back. This is day 3 of our PTG. So we have a full day of topics planned. We're running from 1300 UTC to 1700 UTC today. And you can take a look at the topics in the Etherpad. We are going to go through Manila UI updates to start with, and do a roundup on virtiofs, and I mean, hopefully take a break and do a session with the NetApp folks on adding support for multiple subnets to this in the same AZ. And you'll notice there's a bit of scratches out there. So we might actually be skipping one of these topics, and I'll explain why. And we'll get back after possibly another break and talk about FIPS and secure RBAC, and round up with the technical debt that we're targeting to work on for the yoga cycle. And it's also a call to action. Hopefully we'll get to brainstorm that a little bit and find folks that can help us get this completed. That said, so let's begin with our first topic. It's assigned to 3 folks, Victoria, Hayaxin, Carlos. So take it away, I guess.
Hey everyone, I can take this one. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Okay, perfect. So I'm just going to cover those bullets that we have in the Etherpad. Last cycle, we didn't focus on any implementation for a feature specifically, but yes, we have been working on updating the micro version. We currently support the Manila UI. Currently, we are at 246, which is rocky. Well, you might tell that it's still a way to go to what we are currently standing in the Manila side and the server side actually. Therefore, that means a lot of work. Since every macro version can be totally different, maybe it's adding a field somewhere, or maybe it's adding a new, feature, a new panel, or a new tab, or a new visual component in general. So it depends really on how lucky you are, how much work you need to have in order to bump that macro version. But well, for the next cycle, we are aiming to reach to the Victoria release. So that will be a good update. Maybe we can even get further, but it depends on how many people we have working on the UI. And also, well, speaking of future plans, there are 2 internship tests for reaching for the next round, which are related to the UI. This is with the intention of actually getting more helping hands on the UI. One is adding the shared network panel, and the other one is enhancing the test coverage. Well, the first one is pretty self-explanatory. We want to add an option for Manila users to administer their network from the UI. And about enhancing this coverage, we are talking about the Selenium coverage that we currently have. Right now, we are performing some basic health checks, and it would be nice if we can actually get more test scenarios and making sure that the UI is working as expected and we don't have any regressions. So both of them are expecting to get interns, and well, probably, well, we have some helping hands for mentoring. I will be mentoring for the 2 of the tasks, but also we have Maury that volunteered to co-mentor with me, and Ashley as well. So, well, high expectations from that point of view. I hope we can, for the next PTG, we can share good news about these 2 features. Well, these 2 tasks that we are planning for this cycle. And I guess that's it. I don't know, Carlos or Hayaxin, if you want to add something to that.
I'd say it's pretty much covered on the topics and what happened in the previous cycle and where we are heading to. So yeah, that's great. That's a good update.
All right, thank you very much. And well, just using the space just to ask for more reviewers for Manila UI, and for, well, if you're looking for something nice to work on, there is a lot of room for improvement for being bug fixes, feature implementation, or even the test suite. Like there is a lot of things that you can do in there. So if you're looking for a task and you don't know where to start, Manila UI would be a nice starting point for you. So yeah, that's it. Thanks, folks. That is Gotham.
Yep. I had this thing though. So I mean, we should probably start the brainstorm, and I don't have a slot for that. And sort of kind of I mean, following up from our retrospective, right? We're still looking for a I don't know, a topic or a set of things that we can do as a hackathon for this upcoming cycle. How feasible do you think this would be? It is a bunch of independent tasks, but as you said, I think you've got to be lucky with certain micro versions, and some others will bring in a whole lot of pain. So is there maybe a set of tasks that we can isolate and implement that that isn't too much work? I mean, probably the considerations that we had with OSC.
So it's a good question. My only concern would be that basically you need to like each change depends from the previous one, so it might be hard to collaborate on that one. At least there will be a lot of merge conflict happening if we are trying to,
Right.
But I don't know. I guess that if we organize, like we can make that work. Maybe I see more room for collaboration on any of the tasks that we have for enhancing test coverage. Like if we can define some test scenarios that we want to include, and we work together on actually defining them and implementing them, I think that will be easier from a collaboration point of view, and will be a great help for Manila UI.
Absolutely.
But that's just my my idea or my suggestion here. Maybe others have other ideas or other suggestions that maybe a better fit for that.
Yeah, no, I like this. No, I mean, I guess some of these things might be as simple as, hey, we have this, share panel. We've got to start showing a new column. But you're right in the sense it might actually cause us pain if you're trying to do all of this at the same time, and we have a lot of these merge conflicts and stuff, pretty much like the OSC things, except in OSC at least the merge conflicts were really easy to resolve and stuff. So not having familiarity with the Manila UI code, I'm not sure how that is over here. So about the outreachy things, are you getting interested candidates already, or is that still an open thing?
Yes, we are getting several interesting applicants. Actually, okay. Maureen is working with one of them, and I was working with another one. And I don't know, Ashley, if you got any email or any contact from any of the outreachy applicants.
No, not that I've seen.
And are there any deadlines around these?
Yes, there are. I think we have, let me check the agenda, but we have a couple of weeks in order for them to submit their first contribution. So we are working towards those.
Okay. And this is the December through May 2022 outreach round, right?
That's correct.
Okay. And both of the outreachy proposals this time have been around Manila UI. Is that right? Or
That's correct. Yes.
okay, awesome. All right. So in a good case scenario, I mean, we might get one or both of these, hopefully. And I mean, we've done quite a bit with outreachy in this space, especially with Dina in the past, and with Archana in the last cycle. So it's quite it'll be pretty cool to continue to work on this.
Yeah, totally.
Awesome. All right. Any questions for Victoria? Victoria, are there any action items that we need to like take down and follow up about?
No, not really. Not at this time, at least.
Okay. Any other questions, concerns to share with Victoria? Awesome. If there's none, thanks, Victoria. Thanks, Carlos. Thanks, Haixin. Let's move to the next topic. And this is a quick report on virtiofs. And Tom's here.
Sorry, I was late joining today. I wasn't trying to create suspense. Let me just try first to summarize what the idea is here and where we are on it. Some people haven't heard about virtiofs, so I want to just touch on just enough so people know what we're talking about. Thank you for putting up this link, Gotham. So first, and then I'll try to do it quickly enough so that we can have some discussion. I think John Garbett might be here. I'd like to hear his ideas and anyone else. So the basic idea is that Nova will allow users to attach to Manila file systems to their compute instances, more or less like they attach sender volumes today. And virtiofs is the new virtualization technology for exposing file systems from hypervisor to guest that we'll use to enable this. And if you want to see roughly how this works, there's a demo we did a couple cycles ago that you can click on and walk through. It's not, it's for manually doing the kind of thing Nova would do. And we want to do this for security reasons, usability reasons, and scale and performance reasons. On the security front, today with Manila, you need to access storage from tenant-owned compute instances, typically VMs. And that's in contrast to cases where, with, for instance, sender, where with, say, something like Ceph, you have the hypervisor in between you and the storage. You don't need to access it directly from a VM over a network interface. And this is especially important with storage systems like Ceph that delegate important responsibilities to clients. So that means that your tenants have to keep their clients up to date, and they have to not hack them and so on to keep your cloud infrastructure safe. Or you need to do something like run an NFS gateway in the middle. With this, we also have a lot of complexity in Manila that works well with some backends around network isolation to separate tenants from one another. And we have hacks where we share networks where we tell them to, apply neutron security rules and so on to protect themselves. In terms of usability, you get a consistent user experience across OpenStack block and file storage. You get to be able to mount shares without having to know the details of the underlying share protocol like NFS or SFFS or Lustre or whatever. And you don't have to do access control. Nova's going to take care about managing all that. And you don't, in particular, in cases where, like with native SFFS, have an issue where you've got to distribute keys to users so they can mount and use their shares. From a scale and performance standpoint, you can handle a single mount to a compute node, fanning it out to multiple clients, and you can remove centralized services like Ganesha as gateway, and spread out your mediation of the connection to compute nodes, so you can scale that out. So how to do it, the basic idea is to add a share attach API to Nova. Nova would then use Manila APIs to get the equivalent of what Sender calls connection information, but the information it needs to do a remote mount. It would stage such a mount on the compute node where an instance is running. And it needs to set up the access to the compute node, and it needs to get the export locations, and then it needs to mount the share on a staging location on the right compute node with the right protocol. We had talked about using an OS share library like OS Brick to consolidate mounting code. We could do that, but we don't, as you'll see, we don't think that's urgent, imperative to start with right now. And after staging the share on the compute node, Nova uses virtiofs to expose the share to a guest compute instance. And so the idea of, we're thinking we would start by just doing this manually perhaps, and then build it into Nova but start working on the APIs to do this first. We want to use libvirt to hot plug the stage share to the compute instance guest, which means basically we want to do the equivalent of an attach to the compute instance after boot, rather than booting from a share or booting with a share at this point. And that simplifies the initial implementations. And the owner of a guest VM can then mount the share, and they can do it using a virtiofs tag, which we're going to put in the share metadata and follow a convention or rule or something so that they're the same no matter which compute instance you end up being on, compute host you end up being on. Pardon me. So if we look at, this is a multi-cycle epic. We started talking about it in the Wallaby PTG. At that time, we agreed to focus on the live attach use case that I was just talking about rather than boot time attachments. And we found out after that live attach, which is called hot plug in libvirt, isn't supported yet. So I raised a feature request for that. A lot of people were working hard on the lower levels with QEMU and KVM and so on, but Nova needs to work with libvirt. We kept talking about this at the Zenith PTG, firmed up stuff, and agreed with the Nova people that Lee Yarwood would draft a spec, and we could begin prototyping some code for that. In between Zena and now, Jan Tomko has posted the libvirt hot plug support code that we would like. It's not merged yet, but hopefully it will merge soon. Lee has started a Nova spec. Most of the work for this will be in Nova. and it has been assigned review priority. It will be discussed tomorrow at 1500 UTC. Actually at 1300 UTC. Let me fix that. Is before the Manila session starts tomorrow. Next, we'll refine and complete the Nova spec. I think it would be good for Manila people to review it. A lot of it's Nova internals that in some sense are none of our business, but it's good for us to learn. But we want to make sure it aligns with what we want to do. And we're going to start prototyping. And Lee's planning on using a Fedora 34 dev stack. And there's a copper, Virt preview copper that picks up the patches like from libvirt when they merge upstream. So we'll be able to get the live attach code from there hopefully pretty soon. And I'll work with him to make sure he's got ways to do the remote mounts from Manila with a relatively easy dev stack to get started. So that's the plan. First, I guess I want to say, do we have any questions about what the project is or what the plan is that people want to discuss?
I guess one of the first things would be like, I mean, at this stage, would it be, knowing that it's being debuted in Linux now, in Fedora 34, right now, maybe in the packages, when would we expect to see it in like the other enterprisey things, I guess? And would that be a concern at all? Because I'm not sure if we should be concerned in adding these APIs or defining some sort of a timeline.
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, it's certainly not something I would say we should not be concerned about, but right now we're talking about prototyping only during this cycle. Mm-hmm. I think the question, will need to be asked. We'll need to express interest in getting it merged. From a Red Hat, you and I both work for Red Hat, and people are thinking that it will be downstream in RHEL 9. Mm-hmm. This gives, if we assume something similar for releases like Ubuntu, that would be, probably something like the A release.
Right. Yeah.
So we have a little time to figure this out, but I would say realistically, A would be the earliest.
Awesome. Yep.
But that's just guessing right now. This is not one of these things unless we start on it. Yep. We're not going to get it done. And yes, there are tricks then to not be blocked in one's work, but also not impact production before you're ready. That we'll have to work on.
Makes sense. So we have the AIs. So this team here can go in and definitely start reviewing the Manila, the spec that's put up under Nova. And I guess there are some to-dos over there. So the spec will be improved, but doesn't stop us from providing any feedback that we might already be able to locate here.
Right, and the focus right now is in the spec. What's clearest at this point is proposed API, mm-hmm. which is very relevant to us. We may have opinions on, say, how Nova's going to interact with libvirt or something when the spec talks about that, and it does not yet particularly. But that's not a user usability issue. And we care very much about the user usability. So it's nice that the APIs up there, proposed APIs are taking shape relatively early.
Interesting. Yep.
Anybody else questions about implementation? I mean, schedule, plan, what it is, anything like that? If not, John, are you there? John Garbett? You may not be.
Yeah. I don't see
Okay.
him.
Okay, we can catch up with him later, but John has raised a question about ironic integration and SmartNICs. And I don't know exactly what he has in mind. I'm speculating that SmartNICs are, I've heard of talk of using SmartNICs with ironic or bare metal compute instances to provide some kind of tenant segregation. So maybe there's, the challenge for ironic and virtiofs is that as we've envisioned this, we're doing a staging mount of the remote share on a hypervisor, on a compute host, and then using virtiofs into the compute instance. If we don't have compute instances, how does that model fit? Now, there may be some idea with ironic of still slicing and dicing bare metal hosts, and so that there's something analogous to hypervisor and guest anyway, and that may involve SmartNICs, but I'm just speculating. We'll have to figure that out. Another thing that we will need to design and work on is minimal CSI with this stuff. I'm just mentioning two fronts that outside the Nova work itself, that once we know this is really going to, once we're confident that we are going to get it working for virtual compute instances, Nova instances, then we're going to want to be able to use that when they're used to host Kubernetes worker nodes. And ideally, we'd have some way to extend this to ironic, at least when ironic's used and with some kind of multi-tenancy. Okay, we've probably taken a perfectly good amount of time here. Anything else from anyone? I think we can, at least we are making some progress on this, I think, so.
No, yeah, thanks for reprising this, Tom. I mean, so tomorrow's discussion with this Nova team might actually bring out more questions and such, and targeting the spec and things, so it should be good.
Okay, thanks everybody.
Yep, you're welcome. Anything else from anyone else? If not, I think we're early for our break, which is good. So let's probably take a longer break. What is it? It's 6:35. Oh, okay. That's 13:35 in UTC. Maybe 15 minutes. How does that work?
Is that long enough for you to give a quick nap?
I guess. I guess not. I probably need one though. But let's probably go with 15 minutes. Let's set that and see each other here in 15 minutes. Carlos, hello. Awesome.
Long time no see.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
Hope everyone got their beverage fix. And And let's get started on the next topic here, which is adding support for multiple subnets in the same AZ. So we're talking to Naheem and Philippe about this. So take it away, guys.
I think Naeem will drive this discussion. So.
Great. Thank you, Gautam. Thank you, Philippe. I added a link on the Etherpad, Gautam, if you want to go through the link. It's just the description and the page with everything in it. So, hello, everyone. Just a quick introduction. I'm Naeem. This is my first PTG. If I say something that is wrong or that makes no sense, feel free to correct
You'll
me.
belong. Don't worry about that. No, I didn't know that. Thanks for joining us and welcome.
Thank you. So I'm working with OpenStack just for a few months. So I will try to follow the page and see if I can do everything right. Okay. So I just had a few topics in the beginning with basic knowledge. It's more to remember what we are going to talk about. So we have Manila Share Network that is always attached to a share to encapsulate the networking service. We also have like a neutron subnet that is a pool of addresses that is managed by Neutron, and this will be like associated with the Manila Share and Share network. And we also need to know what is an availability zone. That is like an abstraction to partition in the cloud. So we can have like an availability zone to each country or each data center or power source and stuff like that. So it's just a quick introduction to the topics we're going to talk. So the idea here is to present a proposal to have multiple subnets in the same availability zone. We have a few use cases that we thought for this feature. Basically, if we enable subnets, multiple subnets in the same availability zone, the user would be able to use it IPv6 and IPv4 if needed. Today, this is not possible in Manila. And also, we had some customers that are facing lack of some IPs. There are some users that don't have IPs to allocate their shares, so they need to have a new subnet in the same AZ, but today they are not able to do that. So following the doc, we have the proposed is to have share network subnets that can support more than one subnet per AZ. So we had a change in that link in the Etherpad that has added multiple subnets in the same share network. But the problem is that currently the subnet can only be associated to one availability zone. And the idea now is to address this issue and to allow the user to don't have this restriction and create multiple subnets in the same availability zone. The other point here is that we want to have the ability to update the share networks and its subnets. So currently, a share network cannot have the subnet association changed, and the servers cannot have their network allocations updated. So this configuration is done in the beginning of during the initialization, and this cannot be updated today. And the idea is to allow the user to do that update asynchronously and during the use, not the initialization. And I added also a topic for discussion over there. The delete subnets, we don't think this would need to be implemented, but it's open for discussion. In our understanding, I talked to Felipe when we understood that it would not be necessary. And we already have a spec for this feature. Some time ago, Ganso had written this spec. So what we need now is to update anything that may be wrong or anything that may need improvement in the spec. And the link is over there if you want to see later. What else about the implementation work and workflow impact? We would have some impacts in the driver. What we thought, it's described in details in the spec, but I added a quick summary here. Basically, the driver would need a new capability, Boolean, to determine if the driver support or not multiple subnet server. The other point is that we would need to add a new interface in the driver to update the share server network allocations. In the database, we would need to add a column, a Boolean that would indicate if network allocation update is supported. And this would be set during the initialization of the Manila driver. And the workflow would be like that. When adding neutron subnets to existing share networks, the idea is if the flag is enabled to true, it would support multiple subnets per availability zone. If this flag is set to false, it would not support and it would return an error to the user. What else? The scheduler would look at this feature to know if it can use the backend to allocate a share or not. Existing share servers whose driver implement neither interface will continue to work without changes. So the idea is that if other drivers have not this feature, it should not be a problem. And if a driver decides to implement the feature later, there are a few options to do that. Like the administrator could manually set the field in the database, or the values would be reset in later release upgrades. And I think that's it. I hope I have covered everything. Felipe, if you want to add something or any question.
Yes, thank you, Naim. You presented it well. Just going up, please, Cotton. Just as Naim said, the main use case that we want to develop these features because some customer may facing lack of IP. So our customers, they are complaining that they don't have more IPs to the same subnet to allocate more share servers. So they want to be able to reuse subnets in the same share server. So they want to be able to like add a subnet to a share network, and that subnet will be used to allocate an IP and configure a pre-existing share server with that IP. So we can reuse, we can like using without any disruption. So we will like adding subnets in and use it share server. So that's the main point of them. So that's why we are present this. And the same as like in 2 releases ago, we've developed Douglas and Carlos, I think, and Andre, they developed update for security server in the share network. So the flow will be very similar to that. So we already have the the flow that we follow. So we like add some database in the share network, and then pass this to the driver and let the driver configure the things when we update the share network with the like now with the subnet and the previous with the security service. So the flow we already have in the spec we will also have. So I think as Nain said, Ganso proposed a spec for us, but it's a from train, so it's a long time ago. It hasn't been yet merged, so we will probably update some things because as we already developed the secret service update, so we know some things that this can be updated during this process of updating in user share network. So yeah, so basically we work on this spec, we update this, propose it, and try to work on this in the next release cycle.
Awesome. Thank you. I just had a question about this use case. So you're saying that the existing subnets that they have are running out of IPs. So they'd want to increase the number of subnets. I mean, or rather assign a new subnet in that same share network. Is that the
Yeah, they don't have more IPs in the subnet, so they want to add a new subnet for the same share network. So to do this in the same AZ, you already have the possibility to add subnets, but they want to have the ability to add to the same AZ.
and what will this help with, especially for, I mean, an existing share server is going to be connected to this subnet, but if you add a new subnet, let's say, it's going to affect the existing share server as well as the new share server,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. So it's the idea is that when you add a new subnet, all the idea is that all share. So if the share network has two subnets, so the share server should configure two IPs, one for each subnet. So for the pre-existing share server, we will add more one IP or more one configuration. So
Right.
if you have like two, if you have a one subnet, then you add a new subnet. So it means that you pass to the driver, and the driver say, okay, I will get an IP from the subnet, and they will configure more one IP to my share server. So my server will end up with two IPs connection. So
Makes
that's
sense. But if you're already running out of IPs when you're creating new share servers with the same subnet, how does that work?
okay. The new subnet will be able to have more IPs. So you're running out of IPs. So the share network that you have to create more the idea is not, you're not forcing like if you have two subnets, you will be requested to configure two IPs. But if you don't have the IP for that, it's not that problem. You're not like raising an exception saying, okay, you must configure two IPs. Did you get it? So you just need to configure if you have IP for that subnet. So like when you create a new share server using the share network, what happened is you will not forcing the user to configure those IPs, but not that sense. You should like more grab the IPs from the subnet and try to configure it. If there's no IP for that subnet, it's not the problem. It's not a problem because it means that that subnet is full. So you don't have more IP to configure to that subnet. So you
But
configure.
would this be what the user expects though? Like, and I'm trying to think of this more like what, I mean, how you create a server with OpenStack, right? So you basically say, I'd like to create a Nova VM with XYZ networks, and this could be like, separate networks, separate subnets, whatever. It's a very similar functionality when you're creating a shared server with Manila. You you intend to create the share, so we basically abstract away the server creation part. So we take the network details from whatever you've told us, and if you're creating it in a particular AC, we only allow one subnet, or maybe one subnet per AZ and then the default subnet or whatever, right? So we've taken the one subnet that we've identified and we've plugged it into the VM. And if you have two subnets, wouldn't the user expect that IP allocations are going to be made with both the subnets? And if that doesn't work, shouldn't that fail? Because isn't I mean that this is the workflow that Nova has, for instance. If you it'll fail to be scheduled if you try to provide a network that it can't allocate IPs within.
I got your point. Your point is that if you don't have more IPs, so how could you like add more share servers? So the idea is that how could you fix this problem in your sense? I got your point. So we have a problem of lack of IP in the subnet, and they want the ability to increase the number of IPs, so without any disruption. So we don't disconnect the user on this. So we want.
And I might be a little whatever about this, but isn't this better if they changed the allocation pools for an existing subnet, or is that somehow not allowed in the networking service?
I don't think so. They can't. Because that, as I said, the operator they request us this feature. They said that they cannot allocate more IPs to that subnet. Right. So they want to use a new subnet, and they want to use a new subnet for the same share network. Yeah. Do you get it? So they want the ability to add more subnets to the use share network. I don't know really. It was passage for us the problem. So they faced this problem. They said, okay, we cannot allocate more IPs for that subnet. So we need a new subnet for us, and we don't want to replace pre-existing subnets. So we want to keep the same share network, so the same network interface, and we want to just add more subnets for the pre-existing share network. Sorry, in the same AZ. So the idea is in the same AZ. So they said that they are facing this issue. So actually, we didn't draw the solution. Like we just understood the problem and say, okay, we can do this. We can add new subnets to the pre-existing share network. Sorry, in the same AZ. We just need to change a bit some part of the way that it works, and it wouldn't affect any other vendors because, like I said, we would have like support for this, a capability that the vendors can accept or not this kind of feature. So we are just fixing an operator issue.
No,
yep. So when you have this feature where the subnets are in separate availability zones, they were separate neutron networks underneath the subnets as well, right?
Yeah.
And will they be separate neutron networks, or are you trying to put multiple subnets on the same neutron network?
Yeah.
The second or the first?
Yeah. We are trying to add multiple subnets to the same network, the same neutron network.
Same neutron network.
I mean, in the share network model, we allow multiple neutron networks.
Yeah, that's why I'm asking. And I'm trying to imagine underneath it, if I have share servers and I have, let's just say logical interfaces or something like that, how they're, I'm trying to imagine wiring this up, you know, if I'm actually an operator, how it's going to work. And I'm a little fuzzy on it right now. So I think you're saying, okay, the share network, which is an abstraction, is going to refer to multiple subnets and multiple neutron networks within an availability zone. And each of those neutron networks with its subnet is going to connect to a separate share server, so a separate logical interface of some sort on a could be physical interface, whatever, a separate share server. And they're going to be grouped together. They may or may not both be reachable from a particular compute instance. Is that correct? Or you were talking about this earlier and don't mean to make you repeat. And if I have two share servers with separate allocation pools, separate subnets, and separate neutron networks, each with their own interface into neutron, will a particular VM in that availability zone be able to reach both of them? Or you're saying it may, you were talking about this, I guess it may be able to only reach one of them, and it's going to be sort of a try it and see.
I think if you have like two share servers and each one having your one neutral network, so the idea that they're over the same, if they are over the same neutral network, you want the ability to have different like subnets. So you're like lack of IPs in one, but you can create more because you have a different subnet in the same network, neutral net, within the same neutral net.
Okay, so you're answering when I asked earlier, is it on a different neutron network or on the same neutron network? You're saying the case is that they're on the same neutron network. They just have so let's pretend it's not a neutron network for the moment. It's just a network. It's a LAN, right? And the way we use the word network and OpenStack is just a network segment, as it were. And I can put multiple subnets on the same network, and I can put a server on one subnet and a server on another subnet, and then a client can even bring up multiple interfaces or sub interfaces or whatever, to address each of those, and they're separate layer 3 domains within that single network. So you're not planning then on supporting the case where you have multiple subnets, each on its own separate neutron network within the same share network. I thought you said you were earlier. I'm not trying to trap anybody. I'm just trying to, figure out that. This is something to clarify, I think, is to figure out exactly what your model is here. We have the idea of a share network, but the share network is just a very high level abstraction for Manila. And it can be a bag of network and subnet combinations as long as they're in separate availability zones. And the availability zone kind of disambiguates which one you want. It doesn't matter if we have multiple neutron networks. But now if they're within the same availability zone, it may matter.
Yeah, exactly. And the distinction that it is, we can allow a failure or such as the exhaustion of IPs on a given subnet only when there is another subnet that belongs to the same neutron network also associated with that share network in that AZ. That's probably what's interesting here, because I don't know why, and maybe we should discuss that part. So when you're creating a Nova instance, for instance, you basically go like --net ID. You don't specify the subnet. you let Nova figure out the subnet. And we should probably look at that logic, and it's probably leading around what you're going for, which is that it assumes that under a neutron network, you have different segments, and if you basically have a multi-segmented network, you have some other way to figure out which segment to use for the compute instance to be spawned on. So maybe that's the piece we're missing here, which is, I mean, we kind of built over on top of that, which is we associated these with AZs, and we let the flexibility down to the user. So you can practically associate 10 different neutron networks on a given share network, as long as they're all in different AZs. But if you were on the same AZ, and if you had just one neutron network and multiple segments under that, I guess that's the use case that you're trying to solve, not really the thing of having multiple neutron networks in the same AZ.
Yeah,
It's okay.
it's more in that sense.
Okay. So then, yeah, we need some logic in the network plugins to understand this bit. And I think my
You think,
sense.
you think
Yep.
we'll like face some problems in the Neutron plugin to request those kind of things, like more in subnets in the same AZ? That's your point. You said that we may face some issue while reaching this this scenario, like having multiple subnets in the same AZ with
Yeah,
the
actually,
Neutron, not with the Manila itself.
with neutron, I kind of recall a previous discussion around this, which was that the reason we, or rather Manila, asks for both neutron network ID and neutron subnet ID, and cannot just work with one thing, which is directly just the neutron network, right, is because unlike Nova, we wanted to create ports only on a given subnet. So we allow users to tell us which subnet. Um, so now the behavior we kind of want in your case is that we want the user to tell us the neutron network, and we want, I mean, if they tell us more than one, if they indicate with more than one subnets to use, we will pick whichever one works, right? Is that the
Yeah, it's more.
workflow?
Yeah, because if like we're in lack of IPs with one of the subnet, there's no more IP, so it would fail. So we can no more use like that's network just because one subnet is full. Just one subnet is full, but you have another subnet that is there. There are some IPs, so we keep going using that subnet to allocate your IPs. So, and there are more use case, as if you see the Ganso spec. I don't know, I was not part of the team in that time, but Ganso he wrote this spec during the train release, I think so, and he had like more use case that makes sense for the same. It is the same idea. You add more subnets to the same AZ. Like the API at the Etherpad, the case of IPv6 and IPv4. Like you want to have both, want to access your export location, the both type of IP. So v4 and v6 simultaneously, as you had here, and there are more here. If you see, have the road data between them, the ability to share services. It's in the okay. So this is the case that he had here, but I don't know what is not. It was not merged. I don't know if it was presented in that time. It was not part here. If we found the issue for this, I don't know if you remember this, Gautam.
I vaguely do. So yeah, it was something to do with, I don't know if there's a reference to a bug. I know
it's just like if you go to the end of this page, you see that it's mentioned another feature. Oh yeah, it's mentioned another feature that's adding share network multiple subnets
Mhm.
for different AZ. So in this spec, they had like the ability to have multiple subnets, but in different AZ, the idea is like in the replication scenario where you're like replicating the different AZ and you want to be able to collect more IPs to your share server. So yeah,
Right.
they've solved this issue, and then they add this spec. I don't know if this just like in the matter of, okay, we can do this, and or it was like a request from a customer.
It was a request from a customer at the point, and let me see if I can find a bug report that they raised at the point at that time, and they kind of explained their use case. It was with Neutron multi-segment networking, and I'm not sure if they mentioned running out of IPs though.
Out of IP in the IPv4.
Exactly. Just give me a sec if I can find it. If not, I'll probably follow up and see if it. I mean, we can also just ping Gun, so he might remember this more clearly. Yeah, they didn't mention running out of IPs. It was more about, hey, I have more Neutron networks, Neutron subnets in my Neutron network. And it's not typical, right? It's not typically you can expect to have an IPv4 and IPv6, and that part of this spec is logical. It was meant to be a logical evolution of the way we did stuff. We have not yet done it, which is kind of why we have, it's a big limitation right now that you can only have IPv4 or IPv6 in subnets in a given AZ. So if you're proposing IPv4, IPv6 being the thing, no brainer, we should work on it, absolutely. And the way it'll work with that is if you have two subnets with a given AZ, and you're going through the provisioning path, Manila will request for you for the given share server allocations from both the subnets, and I mean, one of the allocations will have an IPv4 address, one of the allocations will have an IPv6 address, and it could be any number of such allocations, whatever the shared driver wants, right? So and we create corresponding allocations and pass it down to the shared driver so that it can create NICs corresponding to each of those allocations. So that will not conflict with our idea of saying, we will have one network per AZ, because it's essentially the same network, just different addressing. So logically, they're being represented as different allocations, and it's in the shared driver. It's very much possible you might have just one LIF that has two IPs, and
It's possible.
yeah, there's no. I mean, it doesn't get us into this territory of saying, okay, I now have two subnets, both of the same IP family, but I can't add two different allocations. Somehow one of them, I can't even get an allocation because there's no more allocations to provide. But I'm okay just using just one of them. That's the confusing part here
Yeah, I
with
got
this
your
proposal.
Yeah, I got it. Your point is that's more like that's if you had like for IPv4 and IPv6, okay, and when you pass this to the driver and it requests an IP4, IPv4, and IPv6, and it fails in one of them, it should fail the entire deployment. So it should fail the entire operation. We should not like create the share service one of each subnet.
And it'll be an unpredictable thing for end users, correct? Because I mean, that's not what they want to do. This isn't an administrator action of some sort to have the kind of visibility to say it failed, we failed to get an allocation on this.
So, but in this case, if you have like two subnets with the same number of IPs, it means that if one of them has more IPs, it will be useless, because when one of them reach the limit,
Right.
they cannot more be used. Like if the idea of IPv6 is increase the number of IPs, fix that problem with IPv4. So the IPv6 comes to solve a lack of IP. So if you had IPv6 in a sense of that you want to increase the number, you switch to the IPv6 model, just to keep if IPv4, it means that you won't reach this. You won't reach this fix because in
You should theoretically not run out of IPs with IPv6. But I mean, there are other practical reasons why somebody is running IPv4 alongside IPv6, right? So, which has been the use case and request that we've had, which is allow dual stack, because some of our clients can't understand IPv6 or some such thing.
So
yeah, we can't get away from that problem.
The problem here is more like you're running out of IP, right, in our subnet. And how could we solve this? We have this proposal as a possible solution. That our customer is complaining about this. So if you could find a different solution for like
what is the customer going to do? I mean, logically, what is the customer doing with their network is probably the question. And I want to understand that piece more so because maybe we are misunderstanding something about how the tenant networking is done for this for these kind of data centers. Like,
yeah, I got it. As we know, it's the customer. He knows how his environment is. So I think the customer look at the possible solution and said, okay, the only solution I have is add more subnet to the same network. I don't have more solution here in my environment. I think, but we could like bring this discussion to them, say, okay, that's not the way that we could do, because if we're running out of IPs, what will happen with like new share service that we allocate more from the new subnet, but the old subnet doesn't have any more. So it should fail, not like say just requesting for one and ignore the other that there is no more IPs. So we could say that's the problem for the design of the Manila, if you think.
It's more about the design of all of computing within OpenStack, I think. And I could be wrong here. We should probably check what Nova does. I believe I've hit this issue with Nova. When you have multiple subnets, it will try to create ports on each of those, and if any of those fail, it's a scheduling error. So and that is built with that UX in mind, saying if I'm asking for it to create an interface on each of those network sorts. So yeah, that's the part I need to understand. Like maybe if it's possible to get the user that's requested this to answer that question, saying how is networking working, in the sense who determines it? Is this a provider network or is it a tenant network? And at some point, how is the allocation pools configured for this? And what are the challenges in updating such allocation pools? And
yeah,
why did the discussion move to a second network altogether?
Yeah, so yeah, it makes all sense. We could like add as action items. We could go deeper in this discussion, asking them this kind of questions, and see, and we can understand better if this scenario, because we have like a UX problem, as you mentioned.
Right.
This problem.
But with the IPv4, IPv6 stuff, that we don't. We definitely have. I mean, it's a gap right now. And so this approach, even with updating existing networks and stuff, kind of makes sense for IPv4, IPv6 put together. I can't see any pitfalls with that.
Yeah, I got it. Yeah, that's this other use case is also important, but it's not that one that we are like looking for right now.
Yeah, that makes sense. So maybe we should circle back with with the data we can collect on this.
So we keep in contact like with the customer and to understand better his environment, to see what we could do in a sense of not losing the user experience and at in that same time fix the lack of IPs. So
Yep.
we could see a better solution for this.
And when it comes to multi-segment networking, we have other issues as well, because I mean, they are literally on different segments. The VLAN IDs are going to differ. So we have no way to tell which one to, I mean, which one has network access. So if that's what the user is, if that's what the customer is using, it is a multi-segment network, and yeah, that kind of complicates this a little bit more.
For sure.
And especially, like, I mean, think of any of the DHS screwdrivers like yourselves. For instance, you'll be creating broadcast domains, and associating it with the share server. Your broadcast domains are going to be associated with a single segment, if I recall. So if there are multiple segments and you want to update a given share server, you'd have to have an overlapping broadcast domain somehow. I'm not even sure if that's possible.
We got in touch with the network storage guy, and he said that we can do this. We did like a small like proof of concept, right? Trying to do this kind of thing, and it seems that we can. So
Okay.
we need
And
more.
what does the default routing and all of that? I mean, are you able to like configure that on the share server level, like multiple default routes to these different networks, through these different networks? If I recall, I think there was one place where the driver configures a default route.
I think it was not part of the dispute proof of concept. I just got the results from the guy.
Okay.
So I don't have much information how it works. So it's just like it was like I think 6 months ago.
Yeah.
And Douglas is here. Douglas was part of this proof of concept. So
He might drop off just because you're calling on him.
Yeah.
Let's blame Douglas.
Yeah, I just joined it.
Hey,
This
Douglas.
one. So yeah, we'll probably need to configure a route for each specific subnet, and should work. Won't be a problem, because you'll be working with the 2 different subnets, and then you just need to set a route for each one. Yeah. I remember that a customer was doing that manually in his environment, because the subnet that he configured in the past was out of IPs, and he just needed to add another subnet and do not change anything in the previous, because there was a lot of guests already connected. So that's the main issue.
Yeah, the use case kind of makes sense, but what is confusing is how can we define a consistent UX around it? And if we can't, then we're probably under the thing of, you know, this is a one-off issue that we're trying to solve, rather than a real feature that benefits end users. So if you can get all of, I mean, any information about how the networking is set up for their tenants to access this stuff, it'd be useful.
Nice. I got in touch with the customer. I mean, I invite them to this kind of discussion. They didn't join us, but I will report this, and we have like recorded and notes. Thank you for who is taking the note. I don't know. It's just blue, and we can bring this to them and see what we can move this. How we can move this.
Great. Awesome. Thank you. And thanks for taking notes. Is there anything else to add? Any other questions?
Nope.
Yeah, it's one big area of concern, but I can't think of where the other pitfalls could be. But I think we did flush out the this update logic when it comes to I mean, in the Manila piece, things are easy, right? So you just go ask for allocation pools, and if those allocation pools don't come back, it's you error out, and you send a user message to the end user saying we're having issues allocating out of the networks that you provided. You can recheck that with Neutron and stuff. And that mechanism just holds for IPv4, IPv6 combinations.
What if we like add for the UX problem that you mentioned? What if we had like a force possibility? Like say, okay, I hadn't say force, so the user would. I'm just thinking through this right now because you came with this issue and it makes no sense. So I was just thinking. So the default case, the default behavior would be the same as the OpenStack. So if you have more subnets, you must allocate all of them. But if you are in a scenario that that one of them doesn't have its IP and you want to force this to be created, so we had like the only problem that you don't create. You don't create share server, right? So you just create shares. So yes, I'm just thinking a way that's make the default.
I would rather than have something at the share network level, which delineates, okay, this is the kind of share network where I will consume allocations opportunistically. And maybe if as the IP allocations are running out and you have more subnets, I'm only going to use those subnets. But if IP allocations are not running out, I'm going to just try to create a port on each one of those IP allocations. If no ports are able to be created, only then will I error out. But if partially some ports are being created, I'm not going to error out. I guess, I don't know. I mean, it kind of gives you a halfway answer, I suppose, because I mean, think of this as a weird thing, because also you have some shares with exports created on some networks, so you can get to those shares directly, but then maybe some others are getting exported on a different network which is going through a router to get through, and you have no way to determine that because
yeah it doesn't solve the problem itself. It keeps with some kind of bad user experience.
Yeah, completely. It's literally like a fail-safe switch that says, oh, you're setting this, so don't expect me to do anything, right?
Okay, so I touch if I get in touch with the customer, and we can continue discussing the Manila OpenStack channel, and and we see that what we could solve this kind of issue, because our customer is facing this, but probably in the future other customer with the same setup, using the same setup, could face the same issue. So it could be used for the future.
And when you're doing that, also do check. I guess we've done this poll with the operators in the past, and they specifically had dual stack requirements for DHS as false, which we kind of prioritized and implemented. But with DHS, we don't support dual stack. It's either IPv4 or IPv6. So if that is something of interest, maybe that's a good logical next step that you can get, and then incrementally build on top of that to cover the other use cases.
Okay.
But if operators don't care, they're okay with just using one or the other, maybe that's fine too.
Mhm.
Yep. Awesome. All right.
Thank you.
Yep. Thank you so much for bringing this. Thanks, Naheem. Thanks, Philip, and for answering all of the questions. We're doing pretty good on time, I think. 7:40. Okay. So how about we take a team picture and a short break, and then we can come back to the next set of topics here, which is going to be FIPS compliance and secure RBAC. How does that sound?
Sounds good.
Awesome. All right. So, Carlos, do you want to pause recording?
Yep.
Thanks, Carlos. All right. So let's get started on the next topic. Let me put on the topic, but yeah, Carlos, Ashley, please take it away.
Yeah, thank you.
Awesome.
Ashley, want to start?
Sure, give me 1 second. All right, so me and Carlos today wanted to bring you guys FIPS compliance. So this is something that the security DFG talked about earlier this week as well, where we want to achieve FIPS compatibility and compliance within OpenStack services. So what is FIPS? FIPS is a federal information processing standard. It's a security standard. It's necessary for software running in the US government and other regulated industries. It's, excuse me, it's primarily like a cryptography standard, and it's to enable it, you enable it within the OS, and this is an ongoing process. We have a couple CI jobs already in Manila that's passing some tests and then not passing others. And the main reason we kind of want this is because it's a really nice standard of measurement for security. It's just a nice little notch in our belt. It makes things more appealing to the customers as well. Whether or not they actually want this security standard is kind of secondary because it's just great. So we have, as I mentioned, we have a couple of jobs in the CI. Carlos, do you have any updates on that?
Yeah. So basically, let's proceed a little bit. So with why do we want this part? So we want FIPS because then we can claim that our software is secure, and we are basically following the standards for like that are proposed by FIPS and so on, and that we are basically using only cryptography algorithms that are kind of allowed by FIPS, and then pursuing FIPS as a security standard is basically a benefit for all people who use the service. It shouldn't like bring any additional thing. We would only like be following a standard, and then that standard is basically what dictates what are the patterns of cryptography libraries we want to follow. And some of our goals are to basically get FIPS compatibility in a first place. And then for that, we are proposing some changes in our CI, not only us, basically like a lot of other FIPS, a lot of other services as well. I pasted the link there. It was like in the bottom, but it's kind of easier to get like that. So basically, in the first place, we want to get like FIPS compatible for Manila, which means that when we enable FIPS things, nothing should break. And then in order to do that, we've had like some other folks proposing a change where they've added like a role to Ansible role, and then we can import that role to our jobs, and then that role is going to be applied in the nodes we are setting up the jobs. And then with that, if the tests basically pass, we kind of can ensure that at least it's compatible by now. And then in the future, we will need to get FIPS compliant, which means that nothing should break, and also we should like be performing a lot of other tests in order to ensure that none of the libraries are using on like uncertified library, for example. So yeah, these are basically some of the goals we have. And for state of the change we are proposing for CI, we have been focusing on some first party driver things. For example, we've proposed some modifications and added the role FIPS role to the dummy, both JSS true and JSS false jobs, and then we've added the role to two of those, and to LVM, to container as well. But the big thing here for most of the jobs for us is that all of the Manila jobs were using Ubuntu Ubuntu-based images, and the FIPS role that was added to our CI is basically using and can only be applied to CentOS 8 nodes. So we think that we are basically discovering a few more things that in our jobs or in our setup that sometimes would not work, and we are basically trying to fix, adding some fixes to get the CentOS jobs working, and then we can get like clean runs with the CI. And both dummy JSS true and false passed already, but for LVM we are facing some issues, basically due to SSH. We were using Paramiko, and Paramiko is not a library that is FIPS compliant. And then Nade, which is also another community folk that's leading some changes for FIPS in order to have like FIPS compliance achieved. He proposed the role as well, and a lot of other changes to other services. And one of the changes he proposed was to patch Paramiko, and then that would allow us to SSH, even though MD5 is not disabled in Paramiko. So they've patched that change, and but still there are some failures in the job. And that's basically the state. We are kind of stuck on that part where the SSH for some jobs like LVM does not work. And for Ceph, in order to get like a clean run of the tests, now we need to propose a few changes to the like setting up Ceph and so on. But now the jobs are basically being set up with CentOS, and we can run the tests, but there are a few scenario tests that are failing, and that those are like weird failures, and we are kind of trying to investigate and trying to identify what's going on. Yeah. Ashley, something else?
No, I think you pretty much covered the specifics. In terms of timeline, we want to be compatible in the Yoga release by M2, which is the first week of January. And I think Ailey is actually typing. Awesome. Right. So as you can see on the screen, he's kind of explaining the difference between compatibility and compliance. Currently, we have the compatibility tests. up. For compliance, it's still kind of work in progress trying to delineate how we would test for compliance. Thoughts that we've been discussing over the past couple of weeks is testing for the libraries that are and are not allowed according to FIPS. And just kind of every time we find a issue within the CI test, just bringing it up to the community as a to-do item or an action item to achieve that compliance as well. So yeah, that's pretty much where we're at right now. Do you guys have any questions?
Yeah.
So I have
Yep.
one.
Hello. Go ahead.
Sorry. Hi. This is Audie Lee here. Just to answer the question that has been proposed here about the compliance versus compliance versus being compatible, and the question being how to test for compliance. And the answer for that is I don't know at this point. There is a list, you know, that NIST will have and various people will have of different crypto libraries that have been certified as FIPS compatible, and typically certification involves going through and spending a bunch of money and having NIST, you know, ultimately bless the libraries that you have there. So thinking things, for example, that will ultimately use like something like OpenSSL, for example, will be using something that is FIPS compatible, FIPS compliant, and FIPS certified. And so ultimately, what I think we're going to end up doing, at least on the downstream side, is looking at all of the libraries that we're pulling in and looking at all the packages that we're pulling in and all of the crypto, which we already know that we have to do in order for export compliance and so on and so forth, and determining whether or not amongst those there is any crypto libraries that are being pulled in that are not FIPS certified, and then trying to replace the use of those in those cases. So it's not like there's a flag in the library that says, "Oh, I'm not FIPS compliant, don't use me." If you're putting things into FIPS mode, as long as it's doing the right crypto and it's not using bad crypto, FIPS mode will not tell you whether or not you're compliant or not compliant. It'll tell you whether you're compatible, whether you're using the right crypto and so on, but it won't tell you whether or not the libraries that you're using are certified. And as far as I can tell now, the only way to really do it is to inspect and determine whether or not the libraries that are being pulled in are certified or not. So I don't know. I don't know if there's a test. There's no whether there's a CI test for that.
I see. So I mean, so as far as we're concerned, we should be able to run the same kind of tests to achieve both compliance and compatibility for the qualification. And somebody is probably going to use the product at some point and probably put the compliance part as some sort of certification that they've achieved. But is that something we have to do as an upstream project?
I think as an upstream project for certainly the first step is compatibility, is to make sure that everything runs. And then the second step is to look and identify the crypto libraries that are being used, and see whether or not the crypto libraries are FIPS certified. And if not, then look for options to run using a FIPS compliant system library to begin with. So good example for this is Paramiko. Paramiko, wonderful thing. Unfortunately, it does a bunch of crypto using a library that will probably never be FIPS certified. just because people aren't going to spend the money to go ahead and do that. And it does things that I think there has been discussions in the past of making it FIPS compliant and FIPS compatible and FIPS certified, but it would just take too many changes and cost too much money. So instead, there are other libraries, for example, using libssh, which in turn is FIPS compatible, and so that's what we're trying to do as a replacement, for example, within Tempest. On the other hand, and then things, for example, like ZeroMQ, ZeroMQ uses libsodium, which is also not FIPS compliant. And so in that particular case, for example, in the new code that's going on in Directd, they were using ZeroMQ. They're now using something different, which in turn will be FIPS compliant. So you've got to sort of look and see what you're pulling in and so on, and then decide. Figure out whether or not it's compliant, and if not, then figure out if there's a replacement that needs to be done there. And if there's something that for whatever reason can't be replaced, then that's the thing that might be documented as a piece of functionality that cannot be run in a FIPS compliant system, right? Because there could be limitations that way. I don't know, right?
That makes sense. And we in terms of speaking with somebody else over SSH, I think I'm not sure if other services do this within the service, but I know Manila does, and probably Cinder does, and anything that needs to talk to an external appliance. I mean, it's possible that one of the ways to talk to it would be over SSH. So we are all perhaps all using Paramiko at the moment. So it wouldn't just be the Tempest concern. So is there like stuff that's going on in the other services? Do you know?
I have not seen. I mean, we've looked at a lot of different things right now. Yes, and I do realize that there's some places that people are using Paramiko. Right now, the focus right now has been on compatibility, just getting everything working. After that, the focus will be on removing the uses of Paramiko, for example, in the different services. Part of the reason that it's gotten more attention on the Tempest side of things is that in order to qualify everything and make sure that everything is working, we need to be able to run the tests, right? Those fail using Paramiko. So what you find is that when you are running through things, if you do an SSH using Paramiko and FIPS mode is enabled, you could run into a case where actually Paramiko does a bunch of MD5 things which are disallowed, and so those things fail, right? So you may find that those are the kinds of things that are going to fail in your Tempest tests right now, because of that MD5 issue. And I don't know if you maybe Carlos and Ashley, maybe you can tell me, because I don't know where things are. Have they failed at this point because of the MD5s in Paramiko?
Yeah, it failed. Few tests failed, mostly our LVM job, and then we had like one fail in the SFNFS as well. But they are basically for the LVM, it's complaining for basically the same issue that is complaining in the change that is patching Paramiko. The Tempest change that's patching Paramiko, it's saying like there is like 2 parameters given, but only one is accepted. But yeah, changes are mostly failing due to that SSH issue.
Yeah.
And are they failing? Are they failing in the Tempest trying to get to something, or are they failing within the service itself, where the service itself is trying to SSH?
In the Tempest trying to SSH, because like we have the scenario test for Manila, and then in the scenario test we do like a lot of operations as an administrator or as an user would be doing in a daily basis. So like mounting a share and SSHing to an instance and like reading data, writing data. So those operations, we usually do them using SSH, and then they are failing. And
Mhm.
I mean, there might be a lot of some other operations in Manila as well for that, but those failures of Tempest trying to SSH may not be letting us to know of like further failures at this point.
Okay. Yeah. So you know what I've been doing, and you know there's a whole series of tests, you know, that are going across. In fact, I'll see if I can put in the link here. So I had put together just an Etherpad here, with. So there's that there. There's that Etherpad there, just kind of showing you sort of the state of all the tests and so on. You know, across OpenStack. If you go down to the bottom of there, you'll see there's some parts there about the issues in Tempests, as well as you know, all the various jobs that are going on, you know, all and throughout. The most of the jobs that are running there right now are running with a hacked version of, with a dependency on a hacked version of Paramiko that I put together, just so that we could get some results going, right? So the hacked version of Paramiko, you know, tries to goes through and allows the MD5 things which ordinarily wouldn't be allowed, and allows things to move forward and go through there. And so if you run with a dependency on that hacked version of Paramiko, then you shouldn't see the problems, at least corresponding to MD5 with Paramiko. The other, there are a couple of others on the Tempest side of things there. There are a couple of changes that are putting in there. So one is just using that hacked Paramiko, which is obviously not a long-term solution. But there are changes which I needed to put into Tempest as well too. The one on line 35, I think, the one about ECDSA keys. So this is primarily there because in OpenStack we in upstream CI we have a version of Cirrus over there that has a version of Dropbear in there that is old. And Dropbear is the thing within Cirrus that does the SSH connection, and because it's old, it only does when you have an RSA key, it only does a SHA-1 signature, which specifically is disallowed under FIPS. So if you try to connect to a Cirrus instance with that version of Dropbear with an RSA key, it will fail. Simply because it's trying to use a SHA-1 signature, which is disallowed. So the temporary fix, the fix here, and this is probably the right fix, simply because we're not going to be able to update this version of Cirrus anytime soon, is to basically allow the usage of ECDSA keys. And we use cryptography there to generate the keys and then upload them to Nova and so on as appropriate. So that's one of the issues that we ran into. And so with that one, I know we have Tempest folks looking at this right now, but the idea would be that you could specify that I want to use ECDSA keys and instead of RSA keys, and that will allow the SSH to move forward there. At least when you're talking to something that is old, like Dropbear, for example, on Cirrus, and that allows a lot of the tests to pass through there. Similarly, the next one over there is just basically just allows you to provide something that allows you to skip tests, which we know are not going to work under FIPS. And an example of that is in the Barbican temper test, for example. We set up an encrypted volume using crypt setup using a plain text encryptor that is disallowed under FIPS. And so using a LUX encryptor, which is the right way to go to move forward, is okay, but using a plain text encryptor, which has been deprecated for a while anyway, will be disallowed. And so we can then use that particular skip method to this particular Boolean to skip certain tests which we know are not going to work under FIPS. And finally, there are some the next one is my patched Paramiko, but the one underneath there is one attempt that I've made to replace Paramiko within Tempest. It's not still in progress. It's using a version of libssh. The problem is that there is not functionality there to do a proxy connection, which is what is needed over there as well too. So we may end up using something like libssh2 because Tempest itself doesn't necessarily have to be FIPS compliant. libssh2, even though it says libssh2, has absolutely no relation to libssh, and so that's something that we would use. But that's something that we could use in Tempest instead, and that does have proxy support. And I'm hoping to get a patch up for that, by early next week, to see if that will go through. But that just gives you some ideas to the kinds of things, at least, that I'm doing within Tempest. In terms of replacing Paramiko within the services themselves, you're probably going to want to use either libssh, or you're going to want to use something. There's something called pylibssh, which is what Ansible is using to replace Paramiko within Ansible. I just haven't had a lot of luck with that, and that's something that there are dragons to handle that, but that is one possible approach as well too.
So in some sense, the urgency is to get the test infrastructure so that it doesn't break, as I hear you. But in the long run, in a certain sense, that's the reverse of the priority from a security standpoint, in the sense that it's the functional code that one would care about being insecure more than, except for practical reasons, having the test infrastructure, right? I mean, in terms of the actual purpose of security. Now, that means that since multiple components, functional code depends on Paramiko today, it would be nice, in my opinion, to have a common solution to that rather than each component going out and trying to figure out how they want to patch it with this library or that library. And that means basically that OpenStack needs to if I understand it, that OpenStack needs to maintain a fork of Paramiko.
Yeah, I don't know if we want to maintain a fork of Paramiko, but you're right. A common solution would be better. So just on the on the first point that you made, that it's sort of backwards in terms of getting the test infrastructure in. The reason you want to get the test infrastructure in is so that you are able to find out where everything is going to break, right?
Yes, I got that. No, I'm not arguing with that, by the way. If it sounded like I was, I didn't mean to.
Yeah, but the point being is that the test that we're doing is still turning FIPS on, right? And so you're still checking, the from a security point of view, checking whether or not you're using bad crypto or you're using disallowed crypto. It's still happening, right? And focusing on the test infrastructure is making sure that we can actually run the tests to check to see where things are falling down, right? But you're right that fixing the problem that all of these services uses Paramiko, and that in turn will fail things, is definitely an important part. And in fact, when I finally get my patch up to Tempest, and we're no longer using a patched Paramiko, but instead using a Tempest that is not using Paramiko, what you're going to find is that all the test infrastructure will work just fine, and what's going to break after that is all of the uses of Paramiko within each of the individual services, right? So we're going to have to deal with that issue. So I agree, and we're going to have to figure out ideally a a solution that is common amongst all of the services on how to do that, and it won't be a patched version of Paramiko.
Okay, perfect.
It will probably it will be it'll be something else, and that something else might be a recommendation on how to use this one particular library or another particular library, and maybe showing how to do it. I mean, I would rather have that rather than having an oslo.ssh that everyone points to and that we have to maintain on a long-term basis. But that is something that right. I mean, I think that's probably the better solution rather than doing that. But I agree that there is a problem that we are using Paramiko in a lot of places, and it's not just you guys that's doing it for sure. So yes, we will expect to see more failures.
Got it. Got it. And there will be a more central initiative, at least it may involve lots of projects may have to change.
Yep.
Remove Paramiko and put in something according to a common pattern. Okay, cool.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point, and I will actually bring that up with. I've been talking a lot with some of the infra folks and so on about this because there has been the foundation has been approached by various cloud providers who have wanted to use something like a rev stack, for example, to try and test functionality across their clouds under FIPS, and so this is definitely something of their concern. And of course, the first step is to actually get RevStack, which is Tempest running, but you're immediately going to run into this problem eventually. So I will definitely bring that up further as well too with them.
I have one question. It's more about the driver side. Actually, I have two. One first is, what do you mean about FIPS mode? I don't know much about this feature, so I just wanted to understand. When you said FIPS modes, it's something that I should configure. It's a kind of things that you configure in your deployment, or something you turn on.
Okay, so FIPS mode is just basically it's something that's enforced by the kernel. Essentially, you can add the parameter FIPS equals 1 to your kernel command line, and when the system starts up, all of the crypto modules on the system are set into FIPS mode. And when they are set into FIPS mode, then there are going to be certain algorithms and certain ciphers and so on, stuff that will be allowed, and there will be certain ones that will not. And so that is the kernel or the crypto modules themselves basically are the things that will enforce the FIPS, the FIPS restrictions. And so when you turn FIPS mode on, and by turning FIPS mode on, I mean running with a module, running with a kernel with FIPS equals 1 in the command line, or there's a command called FIPS mode enable, which you can use to enable your mode, at least on RHEL CentOS systems. Then that puts the security modules on the crypto modules within FIPS mode, and restricts your crypto accordingly. And then when you run everything else on that, compatible means, well, I run and then everything still succeeds, even in this restricted mode.
And in the FIP mode, it's required that the parts like the storage, which is another compute, it must be a FIPS compliant as well, if you want to run in a FIPS mode, or just the OpenStack deployment is enough. Like, does it require that my storage be in a FIPS mode or something like that, or it's just in the side of the OpenStack?
So FIPS, and here we're talking about FIPS compatibility, right, rather than compliance, right? And so FIPS, again, compliance speaks to whether or not you're using certified FIPS certified crypto libraries. But in terms of compatibility, right? It's something that is tested on, you're turning it on a particular node, right? On a particular machine, right? And so if your storage is on a different machine somewhere, and that storage is not running in FIPS compatible mode, then I'm not sure what that does in terms of a compliance point of view. That's something that when an operator or a deployer wants to be certified as FIPS compliant, they've got to go through a fairly lengthy process where they get an auditor or someone like that, and an auditor will then look at their system and say, well, where are you running in FIPS compatible mode? Where is everything running in FIPS compatible mode? And they're going to have to talk with that auditor to decide where how things are.
And last question, just when you said that SSH is just same node, so you're using SSH in the same node, right? You're using, you're connected to them, to the storage with this SSH. You said about the Paramico. You said that, okay, you're using like Paramico to connect to the storage to do something like in the generic driver, or what else? There are other drivers that's using Paramico to do something like requesting things to the storage, right? If I got it correctly. So if is there some like restriction to use like HTTP instead of HTTPS to connect to the driver, or no, it's not a problem for the?
No, it's not that. It's so there's two parts of this. So Paramico right now, if you were to try and use Paramico to SSH to a machine or something like that on a FIPS compliant system, it would fail because it has some code in there that uses MD5s, and MD5s are disallowed under FIPS. To get that to work, just to get that to work, so we can start getting results, what we ended up doing is I ended up patching Paramico so that it allowed the MD5 usage over there. But that's the first problem. The problem, if you could get around that in Paramico, you could still use Paramico and it would be fine. It just wouldn't be FIPS compliant. Then it could be FIPS compatible, meaning it would actually work in FIPS mode, but it couldn't be FIPS compliant because the crypto that is used in Paramico has not been certified to be FIPS compliant.
I got it. Just in the sense of the crypto. So if you're using cryptos libraries, those crypto libraries must be FIPS compatible. Sorry, right? So it's they
must be FIPS compatible, right? So they must do the right things in FIPS mode. And then if you want to be FIPS compliant, then those crypto libraries must be FIPS certified as well. So
I got it. And just you add here, I think Carlos and actually add this NetApp has a library, right? There's a mention to NetApp.
Yeah.
When should we
using
there's some deadline for move this, or is just it's not required for this? Is it impacting you in some? Because you said that you recommend to change this, right? You're using your hash lib, right? Is it like a kind of emergency or something that we could prioritize for our side, or it's just something that, okay, you just advise us about this?
Is that a question to me? Yeah, so that actually, that's a good, if you look at that there, this is a perfect case, right, where this NetApp driver, is this something that runs on a different node, or is this something that runs on the same node as where Manila is running?
On the same node.
Yeah.
On the same node. Okay. So if you had the NetApp driver and you had on that node, then that FIPS would be that FIPS mode is enabled, then this call over here will, as it is right now, will fail. And it will fail because it is doing an MD5, and MD5s fail under FIPS mode. Right? Now, it is possible to annotate that MD5 call such that you can add an annotation that says use for security is false. If that is in fact the case in that situation, I'd have to look at that code to see if that's a valid thing to do there. And if it is if that is the case, then you could add that annotation. You have to do it in a certain way, because there are that annotation was added in Python 3.9. And it has been backported in some distributions, notably CentOS and RHEL, to earlier versions of Python, which is why we added stuff to Oslo config to allow that basically checks to see whether the annotation is allowed, is supported by the Python that's running there, and if it is, then to evaluate the annotation appropriately. So in that circumstance, if it is possible to add the annotation there, and I had to look to see exactly how this hash is being used to determine whether or not you could do that. Just from the looks of things, it sounds like you can. Said used for security to be false over there. Then that's what you would do, and then everything would be fine for this particular context, for this particular setting.
I think particularly in this case, if you're not using for security purpose, it's just to get a unique value, I think so. But,
yeah,
okay,
yeah, in that case, that is perfectly acceptable. And other projects like Swift, for example, uses MD5s all over the place to get unique values and so on and so forth. And we've patched all of those to do the right thing. So if you look at just at the Etherpad that I put up there at the very top there is a discussion. There's a couple of links to the MD5 Oslo config patch that I put in that was merged in to do that. And I'll put in. There's a whole slew of things that got merged over there based on top of that. So that's up in the background part over there. So that's right at the top. Yeah, so on line 12 is the Oslo config patch, and there's a whole slew of patches to use that in Nova and Swift and Glance and so on and so forth. I'll put a few of the links to those as well there to show you how that works.
Okay, I got it. Thank you.
Sure.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks for this pointer. This is going to be useful. I'm not sure. So I think this was Carlos grepping through the whole code base for use of MD5, right? There shouldn't be any other use cases beyond these two things.
I think there might be for LCM as well, but
okay.
for Paramiko in this case. And then in this case, particularly, we singled out the third-party drivers, and then just some examples over there. But we intend to send an email to the mailing list to ask the third-party driver maintainers to check their drivers if they are using any of these libraries that aren't compatible. So and we would need them to evaluate these and to, if possible, act on those changes.
Yep. Makes
yeah,
sense.
I mean, ideally, all of the third-party guys would actually run their tests with, or run a FIPS-enabled test, right? And you guys have talked about it, and I think it's in there as well too, as to how to convert your test to an MD5 to a FIPS-enabled test, right? By setting up the appropriate role in there. That would be the ideal situation for them, because then they can be sure that not only are they FIPS compatible to begin with, but they stay FIPS compatible, in the future.
Yeah, it makes sense. But the biggest hiccup that I see, Addy, is that most of our testing is on Ubuntu, and that is probably true of most projects in OpenStack, right? Like they might have some CentOS jobs, some of them, but a bulk of their jobs are going to be on Ubuntu. So
right.
To ease this transition, I suppose if two of those things can't happen at the same time, I think is going to be the bigger difficulty for most people. And their CI systems are fragile as it is. So introducing a new operating system and validating that driver against it, no means new, but so far I've only seen Ubuntu being the substrate for most of the CI systems that report Manila.
Yep, that totally makes sense, and that is, certainly has been half of the battle that we've had in getting all of the other FIPS mode things up first. First, it seems like the very first thing we have to do is to figure out how to get things running on CentOS, and then figure out from there, what's broken. So absolutely.
Or have we tried the opposite, which is trying to get things running on Ubuntu, and if there are any challenges there?
The problem there is that the main problems that we've been having with FIPS has been MD5s, and RHEL CentOS did backport the Python 3.9 changes further back to allow MD5s to run under FIPS. As far as I know, Ubuntu hasn't done that. If you're going to run under Ubuntu, then you need to do it with Python 3.9, and kind of go from there. And I don't know very much about Ubuntu, so I haven't been following that. If there are folks that are doing that know a lot more about Ubuntu that would love to do that, then I'm definitely willing to talk to them and see if I can help them. But as far as I know, that on Ubuntu you'd have to run Python 3.9, and I don't even know how to enable FIPS on an Ubuntu system. So, but it can't be that hard. So.
Well, the other question is, how coordinated is this effort going to be, and is this going to be a community goal that we would have to sign up for, cross community or something?
I've been kind of going through and chatting with a lot of people. I know that the foundation itself has gotten requests for this. This is something that I might bring up with the TC as possibly something that could be a community goal or something like that. Yeah. So that's something that I'll definitely bring up. That may not be a bad idea. I think though, getting that
in no means am I proposing that as a thing, but
yeah, no, for sure.
Yeah.
I haven't done any of that simply because there's a lot of coordination that would be involved there, and I was hoping to get a certain get far enough as well too. But I think that the whole idea of being able to do this on Ubuntu and so on with Python 3.9 and so on and so forth, maybe this is something that that would be part of that community goal, because I think folks would be interested in that.
Absolutely, and yeah, and we had the discussion with the TC earlier this week, and part of the things for qualifying to be something to be a community goal should be that it should have been solved somehow, and there aren't too many unknowns. So I think you're at the stage of figuring out this stuff for most stuff, and it helps to swarm at this point, but probably turning it into a community goal might actually be too heavy on the project teams. That might have to.
I think so. Yeah, but if we solve a lot of this, particularly on RHEL or CentOS right now, in the near term, when we solve most of this stuff now, turning it into community goal and having it solved for Ubuntu and across things might make things a lot easier.
Yeah.
So
awesome. I'm glad we've gotten started on this testing. So thanks, Addy, thanks, Carlos, Ashley, and everyone involved with this. I currently don't have much more thoughts than this thing. This is a lot of information. Thanks. It's at least good to start thinking in this direction, and not adding future code that's not compliant. So that's pretty cool. Any other concerns while we have folks here? So the answer to Philippe's question on whether HTTP is okay is, I mean, FIPS does not really stop people from using HTTP, right?
Right. Yes. No, it doesn't. It doesn't stop that. It's the crypto libraries is what it's concerned about.
Yep. Okay. Yeah, and when I say some of the drivers are doing it, it is ideally some of the drivers. It's not really most of the drivers. There's usually a REST interface that Manila communicates to storage devices with in most drivers, and there are going to be some which don't have a REST interface, and SSH is the only way. Like for instance, Ceph. So we would need to fix this SSH issues for those drivers.
Okay. Makes sense.
All right. So is this a good time to call this a discussion and follow up on the action items, or is there some more questions around this?
Well, if this does become a community goal, then we wouldn't really have to do a Manila specification, or should we still go ahead with making one so that we have a reference for our community?
I mean, there's absolutely no requirement, I guess. It is if it helps to think about it and share the idea easily, to write it down sorts and get people on the same page. Specs always encouraged. But if you're not making API changes, I mean to say, don't be stuck to the template. The spec template works for something that is more hairy than something like this, which it probably does not involve API changes in Manila. Maybe it involves API changes to other projects like Swift or Glance or something, but there's no encryption in the Manila APIs.
Okay.
So that sort of a thing. And if it more than a spec, maybe a living document somewhere, an administrator guide or a developer guide focused on how to write FIPS compliant code and what's a node, it might be good. Or even if it's just a wiki article that's pointing to the thing, things elsewhere, that's fine too. But it'd be nice.
Yeah, it'd be nice to have like a landing page and a guide for these code changes.
Yeah, I think that would be great.
Developer's guide would be great because that protects you enables developers not to get in trouble. Presumably CI will protect us in the future, but set the expectations.
Yeah. Actually, there is one more question that I just thought of. Once we do achieve FIPS compliance, the CI tests that we're running now, should it just default to FIPS, or should we keep FIPS enabled tests separate, like run both enabled and disabled?
Yeah, I mean, I have a view on that, but yeah, I'm interested to hear what Addy thinks or what's happening in the other services, perhaps.
So in the other, I think it's a little premature to think about it because we don't have everything running and working yet. Keep in mind that there may be some functionality which just plain won't work under FIPS, but that other folks may want to use. In particular, I can think of, and I don't remember exactly what it was, but it was some protocol where they were using a shared MD5 secret, for example, to try and communicate with some backend or something like that. This is something that we specifically by design will just never run under FIPS, never succeed under FIPS, but it's something that they still want to be able to test. And so you probably want to keep your non-FIPS jobs for that matter.
Right.
Again, as you mentioned before, most of the tests currently run on Ubuntu rather than CentOS.
Yep.
So it's going to be a little while before we get to a point where we have FIPS enabled CentOS jobs and so on. But maybe at that point, you know, once we have all of that, you know, maybe you want to do the switch to run in a FIPS. Personally, I think that's not a bad idea, and then you would have your non-FIPS jobs for the things that you want to test that can't run under FIPS. So that's kind of what I think, but you know, it's
yeah, it's going to be a careful song and dance, I think, because of the fact that I mean, one of the things that was brought up in the TC discussion was that we have to rationalize the number of jobs we're running. And I mean, the CI resources are not increasing anytime soon, at least. So, I mean, if there is a test that's doing the same thing once in FIPS compliant mode and once without, sort of a thing, we'll probably have to make a choice and enable just one of them. Unless there's some stability issues or things like what Adi mentioned, where we can't run something. We have to qualify this, but we can't qualify it on a FIPS environment, but we want to support it because there's users that depend on it that won't run it ever on a FIPS compliant environment sorts. So yeah, I think we should make those calls when we have these jobs. And the first set that you're attempting to merge, if everything is working, we've hashed out the Tempest test issues and the other issues, and you're looking to merge, maybe we can make that call at that time. Let's bring this up at the weekly discussion at the time and decide whether we want to replace the tests or make parallel jobs.
Yeah, I think that there would be like a little investigation to see what specifically can or what specifically cannot, just simply does not work on a FIPS enabled environment. But that would just be hopefully a small subset of tests. Otherwise, we can just keep the enabled tests because it'll run anyways.
Right.
That would be ideal.
And an option is to also do periodic testing. We haven't done a lot of that. We just run bitrot jobs alongside the rest of the bitrot stuff that we do, and we barely ever look at them unless there's an issue. So that's another thing. The only thing is it's going to be somebody's responsibility to keep looking at the periodic jobs and their failures and stuff. Isn't the worst thing, but we at least have some parallel testing that's going on rather than per commit testing.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Awesome. All right. That was a really pretty cool discussion. Thank you for initiating it, joining us, and taking us through this. Sure, there's going to be the first of many of these talks, I guess.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you, Ade, for joining us for this discussion as well.
Yeah, no, thanks. Thanks for having me. So
awesome. Great. So let's pause over here, and I think we should, let's try to get through the next topic and then take another break. We do have one other major topic besides secure RBAC. So let's do that. I promise the next break we'll try to keep it a little longer if this gets boring. So let me switch the topics, and I think I saw Lance coming in and drop out. He might be on a customer call, he said, but let me still alert him just in case. All right. Cool. Time to do an en masse close, I guess. All right. Yeah, let me take you through this. And Vida is here as well. We've kind of been chatting about this in preparation for this PTG, and it's more going to be like a status report of what's going on with all things secure RBAC in Manila, and also about the cross project discussions that are currently happening. Some of the points are not yet captured over here. There's a lot of ongoing developments, a lot of brainstorming. It's good to have the entire community across services thinking about this. You'll see this theme in all of the services, and we've managed to get this to be the community goal for the yoga cycle. And a bulk of what some of the services will be working on is stuff that we have merged already. So this is going to be the things that are the gaps from the things that we've merged, as well as the new things that are shaking up right now for the community goal and the futures around secure RBAC. So I think Lance is here as well. Hey, Lance. So we were just about getting started and sharing our updates on what we are tracking as yoga cycle deliverables. So at the get-go, like I said, there's going to be a lot of cross-project discussions. I'm having my ear out for these, and probably going to have to rewatch or study the etherpads across and try to catch up with these discussions. But one more of those discussions happening tomorrow with the TC, specifically around the community goal and what we're signing up to do as part of that goal. And what was done in Manila, most of that work was in the Wallaby cycle. And we've accommodated new RBAC defaults across all of the APIs. We've eliminated the need to have project ID in the API paths. We also switched the way we deal with what it means to have this blanket is admin role, which seems to apply to API logic beyond below the API layer itself. So it isn't just about who has access to the API, but also when we're trying to make some decisions within the API, more granular decisions within the API, and we're calling in to check what context it is. We kind of made the decision to allow that to be at a system scoped administrator when you're enforcing scope in the deployment. And from that time, and based off our testing, we have filed a bunch of bugs, and these are all of the bugs that are that we're targeting to close, and some of them are carryovers from Xena. And you will see stuff like right now when you attempt a lot of the get APIs with the system reader role, things don't work. And it's because of some changes that are required in the DB API layers, and stuff. And there are also some other inconsistencies, holes, where if you do have a UUID, which you're not supposed to have, you can get details about a particular resource that doesn't belong to you if you were to have this new secure RBAC, which means that if you're a project admin, you could get somebody else's stuff as well, which is a bug we ought to close. So I think that's most of the bugs, or all of it. We may have one or two that are not publicly visible yet. And one of the things that we wanted to concentrate on for the yoga cycle is audit the things that we are using. And this was intentionally something we pushed off from the Wallaby cycle. And this is in line to when Manila is communicating with other services to do something for a user. And it's not it's not that any I mean, this sort of interaction happens on all deployments. If you're not using a driver that does not need an interaction to Nova, Cinder, Glance, you're fine. But specific drivers that will need service instances to be spawned, such as the generic driver, the Windows SMB driver. We as in the Manila Share Manager service owns the piece to go create a share server for these drivers, and and in case of the generic driver to also allocate the backing disk. And so we would be carrying over the user context that was passed to us. And from what I can tell, there should be no issues over here. We are authenticating with these clients, but we're passing the client context that Manila receives, which includes the I mean all of the project information that we need. So far, that's my thought, though, because none of these seem like actions that require an administrator to perform. Although, I mean, I guess part of this was part of the discussion in the Nova room about how Nova is doing very similar things to create to create attachments to create ports on the VMs that are getting created, and how Nova is supposed to interact with the with Cinder or Neutron to make that happen. So right now, the way these interactions happen is that there is a Manila service user that is created. You don't have to call it Manila, but basically we need a user of the service of a service role that has the capability to arbitrate stuff on behalf of the user that actually owns these resources. With Neutron, it's a little bit different. With Manila, Manila owns those resources, so the service user owns the resources in the service project. As far as Neutron is concerned, so these ports are owned by the service, although they could be created against instances that are not owned by the service. That's been the model. So upcoming in the yoga cycle, we'd be doing an audit of these and making sure that the API changes and the RBAC changes in these specific services are not going to affect Manila. And if they affect Manila, we would probably need to know how to fix it or make it work when secure RBAC is enabled. And another side of this, we do use Neutron dynamic routing when creating BGP speakers and peers, but this is mostly for testing, and we do it only on DevStack setups. So that is something else also to keep in mind when we're auditing this stuff. And as far as the client impact goes, we made no changes in Wallaby to accommodate the client, and that stance kind of continues, I think, and it kind of became clearer in the excuse me one second. Sorry, I have a digital assistant that just went off. So Python Manila client has no knowledge of how to use different kinds of tokens or different cloud profiles, like the way the OpenStack client has. So you can very easily point at a cloud.start YAML file, or you don't even need to point. You could use the configuration that you have in a cloud.start YAML file and set the cloud that you want to communicate with when using the OpenStack client. But that's not possible with Python Manila client. It expects you to provide command line arguments, and I think part of the command line arguments that we have to plumb into the to Keystone to even get a token is specifying the scope, and that's something the client Python Manila client shell cannot do today. And this is discussion for tomorrow, but I still don't think it's a good idea for us to spend any time on this, especially given that we want to deprecate that shell. And there might be users that want to use a client which works with clouds that have secure RBAC enabled, but we'll try to steer those users to use the common OpenStack CLI rather than the Manila client shell. And on the Manila UI front, we've kind of had like a band-aid solution, which is we had to update the policies that the service now defaults with, and that was done as part of the Wallaby cycle. And which means that when a panel is being loaded up, we do check whether that API has a particular policy that allow the panel to be loaded up at all. So based on the logged in users role and credentials. So that part needs to evolve because I mean, Horizon's discussing the capability of allowing a user to switch their roles within Horizon. So as long as our panels have the right annotations, I think this should work as expected. But we'll see. This is something that we don't really test in our gates or pay a lot of attention to but I think at some point in the Manila yoga cycle, we'll try to validate that things are still working with the Manila UI change. With the Horizon changes that'll come to accommodate different scopes. And as far as testing goes, this is a huge WIP, and this was stuff that we worked on during the Wallaby cycle that we have not yet merged. And there are issues with those tests. So we kind of, I mean, I dropped the ball on this one with fixing those test issues. And of course, there were also missing tests. There were a lot of APIs where we don't have any of the system scope testing around those APIs, and so this would be effort that ought to be spent in the yoga cycle to definitely call that we have completed the community goal. So this part will be prioritized for sure. The Tempest testing, on the other hand, is large. It's hairy. We've gotten started on it, and you can see there's a couple of patches that we've proposed already. Liron's done this work in conjunction with the Tempest folks. So in Tempest, there is a way to use these credentials and claim what credentials you want the tests to run with and annotate them. So that's kind of the logic we're following. We're also requesting some changes in core Tempest as we go along, and I think one of those changes has landed. You can see details of that in these patches. Yup. Did I mean, Vida, is there anything more about the testing that you wanted to share?
Yeah, thanks, Pratham. So just wanted to mention that that patch on line 52, 788-248 that merged. That was kind of a precursor for our RBAC development because it enabled capturing the HTTP response code, the error codes coming back from the API. So that one's good. The main one that we're working with is that work in process. This is the main patch that we are, Laurent started, and we're collaborating on developing the test around the APIs. And at the moment, it's focused around the project scope, as you mentioned. Thanks, Kevin.
Yup. And this is going to be an effort probably as large or larger than the protection tests themselves. So you can see that the tests have to be thought about for each specific profile, if you want to call it that, and extended, and the behavior ought to be tested across whatever the API is supporting and not supporting as well in terms of negative testing. So the idea is to try and propose as many of these patches through the yoga cycle, and continue to probably work if we don't complete through the Z cycle. And I mean, Tempest being branchless for one of the few times might actually help here, because we'd still be able to validate things against all of the proposed releases, and if we find bugs, propose bug fixes and backport them.
And one of the things that we talked about, Gotham, was we are, because there's so many APIs to develop tests for, we started prioritizing. That's how we started prioritizing the APIs and the ones that are, based on usage. And for example, limits or some of the APIs, they've been deprioritized, and we basically started on the APIs, as you can see, like snapshots, shared creation, shared types in the patch. So that's our the strategy that we're planning to continue to work based on through the cycle and next if we have to.
Awesome. And I know you probably told me this at some point, but is there like a place where we're sharing the priority, or you guys are working on it between yourselves?
Yeah, we were working on it, and it was a bit of a delay because Laurent's out of the office situation, but we will publish it in, during our cadence meetings. We will definitely track it and talk about it. Yeah, and then maybe there's some negotiation there as opposed to changing priorities, because our macro world might be a little different. So we definitely will collaborate on it, Gotham.
Makes sense. Thank you. Awesome. And in terms of documentation, this is something we've called out, and the policies are documented, the policy changes that happened as well. Although we also documented the fact that they are not enabled by default, the new secure defaults. So on the other hand, it probably helps for us to share exactly how all of this configuration matters and how it needs to be done. So there are some examples that I was seeing across the community, folks in Ironic, Cinder, Nova that have written up pretty good documentation on how, specifically relating to those services, but calling out the fact that, these new secure defaults can be enabled with these toggles, and what the rationale behind picking a particular default could be in some cases. And that might actually be, interesting to our administrators as well. I mean, somebody that's looking at the Manila administrator doc as well. So definitely we can do that part as well. So huge list of things that we've rounded up for yoga. And I think this list is going to get longer, if not shorter, based on what I've, can glean and understand from the other cross-project discussions that are going on.
Yep. I had a question about networking. You kind of touched on BGP networking in the context of testing. But I've speculated at times about having the Manila service set up networking, either in the sense of injecting static routes for return routes to tenants, for instance, from a common resource, or perhaps doing BGP announcements where the announcements might go to, for instance, hardware routers in the data center, but where OpenStack is controlling it. So they're either, it's not 100% clear to me
what our future direction is, or Tom, am I not hearing you or?
Yeah, no idea on Tom's side.
Okay. Let's wait a sec. He might have been disconnected. Oh, all right.
Gotham, I just wanted to confirm this line item, the 42 IPv6 for DevStack. Is that IPv6 for DevStack? So this BGP discussion is relates to DevStack only?
Yeah, that's
okay, got it.
So far DevStack only. So technically, we don't do any of the routing setup within any of the Manila drivers or in the Manila network substrate. It's mostly in when we are setting up testing in a particular way, we want we want to be able to access VMs over IPv6. We want these VMs that we're deploying to be accessing, network interfaces for the storage over IPv6. And in that case, which is kind of why we set up a BGP speaker on the DevStack node that advertises return routes for the tenant networks that are being dynamically created as part of the tests.
Okay, gotcha. Thanks.
It's not in the drivers or in the Neutron plugins that we have. But I think Tom's question was more than that. I don't know if his audio is working now. I think. I got a ping from him somewhere that said his Zoom died. All right. Let's see if we can reconnect. But yeah, any other questions or concerns in the meanwhile? It looks like a bunch of us are having Zoom issues.
Yeah.
All right. If maybe we should probably if there are no more questions from the group that is here, we should probably hold off and revisit this topic during one of the weekly meetings or set up a meeting just for this, or follow up, as part of the summary that we'll write. I'm sure there's going to be more because, like I said, there are cross-project discussions that are happening. There are brainstorms that are happening in the other projects, and there are UX questions being posed, such as how is this expected to work when with this kind of a situation and the other. So I'm sure there's going to be some more changes either in Manila or in Oslo policy or in Keystone to accommodate some of the use cases that folks are bringing up, or we might have some to-dos for the upcoming release or the release after that. So that said, anything else while we're here? If not, we'll take a break. looks like nothing. I think I'm getting chats from some of the folks that are not able to make it on Zoom. So let's take this break and figure out networking issues and get back to our next topic about the technical debt that we have, and see what we can pick off for the yoga cycle. So how about making this a 12-minute break, because it'll bring us right
Yeah,
to
sure.
the. Let me just go. All right. Just posted on the PTG bot if anyone was looking for it. All right, tech debt for yoga. We've done this for the last couple of PTGs, and I kind of feel like we should have always been doing this. So we've kind of rounded up some of the things that we have had to do in the past cycles and nailed it during the cycle. And part of the way this happens is we get a common understanding and a sense of urgency to do something, right? And most of the times it's associated with a deadline, which is in our case with root wrap or with the I forget, it was the library we just got rid of, retrying in favor of something else. I even forgot. Oh no, wait, actually it was tenacity in favor of retrying. Stuff like that. So the issues that are happening even in elsewhere, dependencies that we have that have now got changes that we've got to acknowledge in the code. And here's a small list of things that are organized here. They're not really like ordered in any way. So let's probably go through them and ask some questions, brainstorm, and try to understand if that's something we can commit to doing in yoga, and try and also ask for help in this case, because at least this list of things I don't think anyone signed up to do. So here's one of them, which is dropping Python Keystone client from Manila client. And I don't know, Victoria is not on the call, but Victoria and I have both looked at this at some point. Oh, there you are. Okay. I don't know how I didn't notice. Okay, sorry. Go ahead.
No, actually, I don't have too much to add, but this one has been there for a while now. And
Yeah.
it's, well, I think we are the only project still relying on the Python client, so the Python Crystal client.
Yeah.
So I think we should raise the priority for this one.
Yeah. Definitely. And I guess one way to tell is using the code finder and verifying who else is using this. And this has been a long-standing issue with Keystone consumers. Initially, all of that logic was in Keystone client, and at some point factored away into a Keystone auth. So if you were writing anything to do with identity, you probably depended on the Keystone auth library, but for legacy things like Python Manila client, we needed to clean it up, like the way Victoria has proposed over here. And at some point, I think we had various people looking at this, but it's quite a huge change for one, and we're also having to make those calls about how to go about the deprecation for this, who's depending on this, and how do we clean it up sorts. So that's what makes this difficult. And in the last release, we kind of had at least one portion of this completed. We had deprecated a bunch of things in the in an older release. We got rid of those, rid of supporting those parameters. So now, if you're installing Python Manila client right now from pip or from any of your distros that's shipping with the latest Xena release, you're going to get Python Manila client 3.0.0. That's because we've remote support for certain things, and we wanted to do this, do these other deprecations alongside removing support, like we're as we are moving to Keystone Auth, some of these parameters have changed. If somebody is importing the clients in their automation, they would need to use these renamed parameters if they are renamed, or stop using something because it's ignored, and or basically, like, adapt to a completely new change. From compatibility perspective, that's what these decorators here are doing. They're warning people that are importing this code by logging a message that they're using something that's deprecated. And we want to keep this deprecation around for a little bit before we switch and remove support for this, just like how the previous deprecations worked, which was kind of in the same patch, but we factored it out. And with Keystone Auth, we get some more capabilities, some of which we're going to be even talking about tomorrow, which is version negotiation. The version negotiation bits that we have in Python Manila client is ancient. It works great, but the Keystone Auth has a common view of version negotiation that's there across all of the OpenStack services. I don't know if there's anything that conflicts with our implementation. Last I checked, it works a lot like ours, but I could be wrong. I'm going to research between today and our session tomorrow, because we're going to talk about version negotiation for the OSC client. Apart from that, we also thought we could do something more in this, which there was an HTTP client. We thought we could go ahead and retire that and have a session client in the same release, but retire that as in not deprecate it, just remove it. But I suppose that was we kind of punted that decision. We'd still have to maintain this HTTP client. Although nobody should be using this inner HTTP client, hopefully, because it's not something we're exposing or we're documenting. We have a client interface that people are supposed to use and come through, but we don't know that. That's kind of the problem that we had with this. Yeah, that's mostly it. And alongside, when we ourselves in the shell are using these using this new client, we're going to have to, of course, stop using any deprecated ways of doing things. So there are a bunch of shell changes that Victoria made, and these need new tests, perhaps, or fixes to existing tests.
That will require some refactoring because it's kind of old. It's probably more than 2 years. So if we are listing it, it's going to take some work.
Yeah. Yep. So this is this work that Victoria, we are comfortable committing to for the yoga cycle, or do we need any help? Do we need some new eyes, somebody to take, a look at this?
No, I think we can follow up on this one.
Okay.
See, we can utilize whatever we have in there. We think to create something from scratch, but it shouldn't, like the approach of fixing that up, it shouldn't vary too much. At least if we want to keep consistency across different projects, how they are implementing the same thing.
Yep, makes sense. And I'll follow your lead on this. You've been pushing most of these patches, and I updated it a little bit to try and see if it can get merged last cycle, but I'll work with you and we'll see if we can get it early out.
Nice. Sounds like a plan. Thanks.
Awesome. All right. Any questions about that? And I guess part of the plan that I do want us to have over here is as we go from Keystone auth to Keystone client, with all of these deprecation changes that we're making, we would be bumping up the major version for Python Manila client. The major version bump would be absolutely necessary if we have breaking changes. But if we, I mean, we'll probably anticipate breaking changes. There could be some functionality, esoteric, but some functionality that we would have to end up sacrificing. And we'll definitely advertise that by bumping up the major version. And we'll try hard that it could be a minor version bump rather than a major version bump. But the other aspect, which is which we can discuss tomorrow, is deprecating the shell. That will require a major version bump anyway. So even if we make these deprecation changes without a major version bump, we are trying to do some things in the client which will need the which will add reason to bump up the version. All right. The next thing is Cinder and Nova support online extensions. And they do that from a particular micro version. They don't really do a good job right now. I don't know if that's fixed in Xena. I know Tom was working with the Cinder team to try and make that more user visible, as far as allowing somebody like a user that's creating a share through Manila to discover that an online extension is possible. Or I don't remember if it was something just to do with multi-attach.
Well, we didn't include that capability in this iteration, but the capabilities they're exposing now are multi-attach and availability zones, and maybe it is online extension. We'll have to check. And there's a third, so it's possible.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
No problem. But that's what I was just looking at this as an old to-do that we had. So currently what the driver does, the generic driver, is it, of course, it disconnects the block device, it extends the block device and plugs it back into the service instance. This will cause client disruptions. So which is unfortunate, but it is the way the only way it used to work for a long time. But if we were to test something uniformly across all of the drivers, you should be able to extend and shrink shared file systems without experiencing client disconnects. So if we can enhance the reference driver to that, that would be a good change. Although that question is relevant, which is, besides having a reference implementation for online extension, are we trying to do anything else? Like, are we trying to enhance this because somebody is trying to use the generic driver in production? I don't know who added this question. Tom, was that you?
Yeah, it sounds like me, right? Yeah, my thought is you're suggesting that as a reference, if it's only for the reference driver, then the question would be, does it would limit us on certain kinds of potential scenario tests, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's precisely it. And we've kind of, the scenario tests are funny in this regard, that if they experience a disconnect, they'll attempt to reconnect. But that's not what workloads would do.
It's not what workloads would do, but it's not clear to me that depends on what we're trying to test.
Right.
If we're testing Manila core code and just need a backend to do it. You know, I mean, or are we testing the quality of the backend? You know, I mean,
we're testing both in combination.
Yeah, well, generic driver is a mix of a backend and a driver. You know, to some extent, because we're doing part of the backend functionality in Manila as well. And we're using OpenStack for it. But anyway, I won't go there. My general drift is it may be worth doing if it's cheap and somebody's interested, or if somebody is interested because they want to run it in production and really want to make it work. Of course, there are a number of issues on that second, besides the ones we're listing here that need to be addressed for that. That's just my personal opinion on it. Let's put it that way. I mean, it's an interesting problem, but most of us have other things we have to do.
No, absolutely. No, that's kind of why it's being discussed as a tech debt, because it's, I mean, if it were to be requested by an end user, or if somebody has shown interest to this, it probably would have been done already, right? Because online extensions, I think, was something that Nova added around the Queen's cycle. So it's been a while. So and the next one's also in the same flavor. You know, users have requested it in the past, but nobody's probably had the time to work on it.
Right. The next one, if you're moving to it, is, I think, cheap, though. I mean, I think it's a low-hanging fruit. And I'm not sure the online extension is. It might be if we have the capability. Discovery.
Yeah, exactly. If the capability discovery exists, then it is a low-hanging fruit, and it is probably something like a good first issue for somebody that's looking to contribute to Manila, or you know, if end users want it, there's somebody that's relying on it in their cloud. You know, they might be interested in contributing to it if they've not written any OpenStack code in the past as well, because it's not that big of a patch from what I anticipate. Or if anybody's got some time and bandwidth and is looking for a, you know, fun thing to do to attempt. I think part of the thing over here is to make sure that we are requesting the service instance capability at a particular API microversion for Nova, where that capability was even added. But the microversion being there isn't the only thing. You need to have a compatible Cinder backend and a compatible Nova backend, meaning only libvirt can do this. And in Cinder, I suppose there is some issues with SCSI versus NFS sort of drivers. Like there's some drivers that can't do this at all. So which is why I think it's a whole capability that ought to be discoverable by an end user. Will I experience disruption or not when I do this?
Sure.
Awesome. So maybe I should probably add a wish list tag over here and keep it in the backlog. So just a general call out if you're here or if you're watching this later, that we would like this capability, and except we don't have the bandwidth to commit to it. So if you're interested to do this, we'd be happy to collaborate or work with you to get this in. The same thing goes for the next issue, which Tom says is a much easier process, which would be to support this hardware SCSI model called virtiofs SCSI. which allows the attachments to not really be named after alphabets, but I think use UUIDs, if I recall right.
Um,
Yeah, there's like a bug open for that as well, and if I recall correctly, there's even a change for someone trying to use UIDs instead of trying to use the default, which it would be like the alphabet. So let me check. I think I have it open here because it was in, if I recall correctly, it was in my list of stale bugs.
Oh, I
So
see.
let
Okay.
me check. Then for this bug, I've just added like a comment in the bottom, and then I said it's still relevant for Manila to have that fix, but there, if I recall correct, there were some comments, and we would need to have someone to take a look at those.
Yep.
Either calc's not working, but I just found like the link in my history.
Okay.
So
Good.
yeah, here we go in the chat.
Oh, add it to the Etherpad, I guess.
Oh yes, that works too.
All right. So we are trying to set this bug to a wish list then.
Yeah. Yeah, the proposed fix, it's quite old at this point, but if you want to, we can revive that. It has a +2 from Tom, but Thomas Bechtold added a -1 and then added some remarks there.
Mm-hmm.
it might be okay, even though I did +2 it.
Awesome. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. I've added the link in the Etherpad, but I don't know why it does not show up for you.
Oh, wait, hold on. No, I moved it.
Oh, yeah, sorry
you
about
had
that.
added in the above thing. No problem. Thank you.
Yeah,
It's
the other thing is like in my screen, it seems
it's still on the older thing. Oh, my
yeah.
goodness. Okay. I think there was a Nova issue as well that we had reported at some point about the 26 PCI devices, and that was updated over a period of time. I think that issue got closed because of the hardware model annotation in the flavor. So we should check. But this is related, yes, the UUIDs aspect. And I don't remember if we had further discussions even with Kanso about this. We can check with him tomorrow. He's joining us. Yep, that's all I had to say about that, in the sense that this is also a wish list item for the generic driver. That's again open for if somebody is looking for a fun exercise to do. The next one is about publishing the container driver image to tarballs.openstack.org or Quay. So we've had this discussion, I suppose, in the past PTG, and I'm not sure if if we took some AIs over there, we can check, but it continues to be an issue that we are pulling this image from a GitHub repository somewhere. And
so, which is the requirement to get the image there? Like, do you need some sort of account? Is there some specific procedure in order to build those images?
Not really. So we have a disk. We have sufficient disk space in the tarballs.openstack.org space that we have for the image elements. And we've been pushing out all of the Manila service images out there, as well as the test images.
So every time we build a new image, like in the CI, then it got updated, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And this is happening with a bunch of playbooks in the Manila image elements project. And the playbooks today even build the container image, except they don't push it out there. So let me share the details on that. So here's Manila image elements. It has a job called build images, and there's a build image Docker. And these are basically the playbooks. And then there is a publish artifacts job that runs after these are tested. These images are tested. And we're running all of these tests, and we kind of like using the image that we produce. We're using that for testing, but we don't really push it out. And we end up using something that is on a repository somewhere else sorts within the driver configuration itself for the CI. And the playbooks are here, which has this publish artifacts thingy, which takes whatever we build in under images and pushes it to the log server, I think, first.
Nice.
And a similar thing for the build images stuff. We call a shell script which does that. Yeah, we wrote a role. So most of the code here exists. We should probably use the same approach for the container driver. That's the ask here. Yeah, this kind of just prepares the image to be copied out and stuff. So at some point there was interest to work on the container driver. I think it keeps coming up every time. I think there's a new DHSS true feature, but then we don't get around to doing this. So that's the thing. Again, another wish list item, possibly for somebody that wants to explore, how to use this, how to use the CI to build this and push this out, or how do you maintain images on Quay, maybe. Or elsewhere. Any questions, concerns, thoughts? If not, I think we should, yeah, we're at the hour. So let's call this a discussion. We do have one more tech debt item, and I think we might actually get this one done in the yoga cycle, or we'll be forced to accommodate changes in SQL Alchemy. And this might also be one of those things where which is coming as a cross-project effort. but you have some notes out there that I've added if you want as a reference. If you intend to work on that, and if you want to understand the DB layer better, do talk to me, because I have some ideas about this as well, and I might just end up creating a blueprint to capture all of these changes for that topic. And and if you've worked on the DB layer in Manila, you know how messy it is. So it would be nice to get a bunch of things cleaned up there. That said, we're a minute over, and so let's call it a day. Thank you all for joining. And if you have any concerns, let's move them over to tomorrow. Go ahead and add a topic anywhere, and I'll try to space it in between. If not, I'll see you tomorrow for the beginning with the operators talk, the OSC migration, CSI updates, and OpenStack SDK. A very fun day tomorrow, because we're also ending it with the happy hour. So I hope to see everybody there for sure, and we'll try to make it fun.
Yeah, thank you.
Yep.
Thanks all.
Thanks,
Yeah,
guys.
bye. Thank you.